The massive chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a cathedral made of light and metal. Ambassador Rebecca Hayes stood at the center, alone on a platform that seemed to float in empty space. Around her, hundreds of alien beings watched from their elevated seats, their forms ranging from the beautiful to the utterly bizarre. She kept her back straight and her face calm, though her heart hammered in her chest. 3 days. 3 days of testimony, arguments, and deliberation. 3 days of watching the galaxy's most powerful civilizations decide whether humanity deserved to exist among the stars. The Methodians sat to her left, their bodies made of living crystal that pulsed with cold blue light. They were beings of pure logic, creatures who had never known war or chaos in their million-year history. To her right, the core rim floated in containment fields, telepathic clouds of energy that communicated in colors and emotions. And directly ahead, the Valkyrie towered over everyone else, ancient reptilian giants who claimed to have witnessed the birth of galaxies. Rebecca had presented humanity's case as well as she could. Yes, the colony ship Horizon had fired on the Vraxian raiders. Yes, hundreds of Vraxians had died in the battle. But what choice did they have? The raiders had ignored all hails, all warnings, all attempts at peaceful communication. They had come to steal, to kidnap, to kill. The human colonists had families aboard that ship. Children. The elderly. They had defended themselves with the only tools they had. But the Council saw it differently. To them, humanity was a young species, barely 200 years into space travel. They were violent, unpredictable, and dangerous. The Vraxian incident was just the latest example. Before that, there had been the mining dispute with the Keltrans, the trade war with the Silicate Collective, and a dozen smaller conflicts. Everywhere humans went, chaos seemed to follow. The head Methodian arbiter rose now, its crystalline form catching the light and splitting it into rainbows. When it spoke, its voice resonated directly in Rebecca's mind, precise and emotionless. "We have reached our decision." The chamber fell silent. Rebecca could hear her own breathing loud in her ears. Back on Earth, billions of people were watching this broadcast, waiting to learn their fate. Would they be welcomed into the galactic community, or would they be cast out, quarantined like a disease? "Humanity stands at a crossroads," the Methodian continued. "Your species has shown both promise and peril. You have achieved remarkable technological advancement in an astonishingly short time. Your creativity and adaptability are noted. However, your tendency toward violence and disorder cannot be ignored." Rebecca felt her stomach drop. This was it. The rejection she had feared. Therefore, the Council has decided to grant humanity one final opportunity. Wait, what? You will be given a chance to prove your worthiness to stand among civilized species. You will undertake a mission that has defeated 17 previous expeditions. You will venture into the region known as the Dying Zone and retrieve the artifact of stabilization, created by the Ancient Ones before any current species had achieved sentience. Rebecca's mind raced. She had heard of the Dying Zone. Everyone had. It was a region of space where the laws of physics were breaking down, where reality itself was collapsing into quantum chaos. Ships that entered never returned. Probes lost contact within minutes. The Methodians had sent their finest AI-controlled vessels. The Quorum had dispatched their most powerful telepaths. The Valkyrie had sent warriors who had survived 1,000 battles. None had come back. "If you succeed," the Methodian said, "humanity will be granted full membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges. If you fail or if you refuse this mission, Earth and all human vessels will be quarantined to your home system. All ships beyond your star will be dismantled. Humanity will remain confined until such time as you have proven, over centuries, that you have evolved beyond your violent nature." It was a trap. A beautiful, elegant trap. Refuse and humanity was imprisoned. Accept and they were almost certainly dead. Either way, the problem of humanity was solved. Rebecca looked around the chamber. She saw satisfaction on some faces, pity on others, and what might have been respect from a few. They expected her to ask for time to consult with Earth's government. They expected negotiation, pleading, perhaps even anger. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and looked directly at the Methodian arbiter. "On behalf of humanity, I accept your terms." A ripple of surprise moved through the council. The Methodian's crystalline form flickered, perhaps registering something close to shock. "You do not wish to consult with your world leaders? You do not require time to consider?" "No," Rebecca said firmly. "Humanity will prove ourselves worthy. We'll retrieve your artifact and we'll do it our way." As she walked out of the chamber, her assistant Thomas caught up with her, his face pale. "Rebecca, they just sentenced us to death. Why did you agree?" She looked at him with a slight smile. Because refusing meant slow death. At least this way we go out fighting. Besides, Thomas, 17 expeditions failed because they tried to do things the logical way, the careful way, the civilized way. She paused at the door. Maybe it's time someone tried the human way. The ship was called Resilience, and it looked like it had seen better days. Captain James Carter walked through its corridors, his boots echoing on the metal floors. The vessel had been a military frigate once, before the Council demanded all human warships be decommissioned. Now it was hastily rebuilt for what everyone was calling a suicide mission. James stopped at the bridge viewport and stared out at the stars. 48 years old, with gray streaking his dark hair, he had commanded vessels for 2 decades. But his last mission had ended in disaster when he disobeyed orders to save a stranded crew. The military court-martialed him. His career ended in disgrace. Now they needed him again because nobody else wanted this job. "Captain?" A woman's voice called from behind him. He turned to see Dr. Emily Watson climbing onto the bridge, her red hair tied back in a messy ponytail. She carried 3 data pads and looked like she hadn't slept in days. Probably hadn't. Emily was 32, brilliant beyond measure, and absolutely terrible at following safety protocols. Her quantum theories had revolutionized engine design, but her experiments had also destroyed 2 laboratories. The scientific community called her reckless. James called her exactly what this mission needed. "The quantum shields are installed," Emily said, dropping into the co-pilot's seat without asking. "They'll hold for maybe 20 minutes in the dying zone. After that, we're flying blind." 20 minutes? James raised an eyebrow. The other expeditions had shields that lasted hours. "And they all died," Emily pointed out. "Their shields tried to impose order on chaos. Mine are designed to flex, to adapt. Think of it like the difference between a rigid wall and a willow tree in a storm." Before James could respond, heavy footsteps announced the arrival of Daniel Brooks. The man was built like a bear, with broad shoulders and hands scarred from decades of manual labor. At 55, Daniel had spent more time in asteroid fields than most pilots spend in open space. He had survived equipment failures, solar flares, and a dozen situations that should have killed him. When asked how, he always said the same thing: "I trust my gut." "Ship's ready," Daniel said, his voice rough like gravel. "Checked every system twice. She'll hold together." Probably. Probably? Emily laughed. "That's reassuring." "Best I can offer for a ship heading into a place where physics goes to die," Daniel shrugged. The bridge door opened again and everyone fell silent. A Methodian entered, its crystalline body refracting light into dancing patterns on the walls. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, its form geometric and perfect. This was Observer Thelian, sent by the Council to witness humanity's attempt. And, James suspected, to report back when they inevitably failed. "I have completed my inspection of the vessel," Thelian said, its voice like wind chimes. "Your technology is adequate, though primitive. Your approach is highly irregular." The Methodian expedition used 17 AI systems to calculate safe passage through the dying zone. "You have none." "That's right," James said. "The Quorim sent their most powerful telepaths to navigate by sensing the quantum fluctuations." "You have no telepaths." "Correct. The Valkyrie sent warriors with 1,000 years of combat experience. Your crew is 3 humans and myself. This mission is doomed to fail." James walked over to stand in front of the crystalline being. 17 expeditions failed using logic, telepathy, and ancient wisdom. "Maybe we'll try something different." "And what is that?" Thelian asked. "We'll figure it out as we go." Thelian's form flickered, colors shifting in what might have been confusion or disbelief. "That is not a plan. That is chaos." "Welcome to humanity," Emily grinned. The next morning, the Resilience launched from the orbital station. Earth hung below them, blue and green and beautiful. James wondered if he would ever see it again. Probably not. But Rebecca Hayes had been right about one thing. This was better than waiting around for centuries, caged in their own system. The journey to the dying zone took 6 days. As they traveled, James watched his crew. Emily spent hours staring at quantum readouts, not calculating but just observing as if trying to feel the patterns. Daniel walked the ship's corridors constantly, checking systems by touch and sound rather than instruments. They were preparing in their own strange ways. Thelian spent most of the time in its quarters, likely writing reports about the primitive humans and their doomed mission. On the 6th day they reached the boundary. Space ahead of them looked wrong. Stars flickered and doubled. Light bent in impossible directions. Reality itself seemed to shimmer like a mirage. All previous expeditions stopped here, Thelian announced. They spent days calculating the safest route, analyzing quantum patterns, preparing detailed navigation plans. James sat in the captain's chair and cracked his knuckles. How'd that work out for them? They all died. Then we're not stopping. James looked at Daniel. Take us in. Trust your instincts. You're insane, Thelian said. Daniel grinned and pushed the throttle forward. Yeah, we get that a lot. The resilience crossed the boundary and everything went sideways. Alarms screamed. The ship groaned. Reality twisted around them. And somewhere in the chaos, James Carter started laughing. The first thing that went wrong was time itself. Emily watched the chronometer on her console jump backward, then forward, then display symbols that weren't even numbers. Her coffee cup floated upward, but the liquid inside poured downward. She tried to calculate what was happening and felt her brain start to hurt. Stop thinking about it, Daniel called from the helm. His hands moved across controls that were flickering between solid and transparent. Just feel it. Outside the viewport, space had become a nightmare. Stars existed in multiple positions simultaneously. A nebula was both in front of them and behind them and also somehow inside the ship. The hull groaned as it tried to exist in several states at once. Thelian stood frozen in the corner of the bridge, its crystalline body pulsing with erratic light. When it spoke, its voice came out fragmented and distorted. This is impossible. Matter cannot exist in simultaneous quantum states at macro scale. The laws of thermodynamics are inverted. Causality has no meaning here. Yeah, it's pretty weird, James agreed, watching his hand phase in and out of visibility. He tried to pour himself coffee and found the pot was full, empty, and broken all at the same time. He chose to believe it was full and somehow it was. How are we still alive? We shouldn't be, Emily said, staring at readings that made no sense. Her instruments showed they were moving forward, backward, and standing still. Their speed was both zero and infinite. According to this, we died 3 hours ago. Also, we haven't been born yet. Daniel laughed, a sound that echoed strangely in the twisted space. Reminds me of that asteroid field in the Kepler system. Magnetic storms so bad that compasses pointed everywhere at once. Instruments went crazy. Had to navigate by feel, by instinct. Trusting what felt right instead of what the numbers said. This is not comparable to a magnetic storm, Thelian said, its voice rising in what might have been panic. This is fundamental reality collapse. We need to calculate safe passage. We need logic. We need order. As if responding to those words, Thelian's crystalline structure began to crack. Fine lines appeared across its surface, spreading like a web. The Methodian being was trying to process the chaos with pure logic, and it was literally tearing itself apart. James jumped up and grabbed Thelian's arm, or at least the part that seemed most arm-like. Stop calculating. Stop trying to make sense of it. I cannot stop. I am a being of logic. Without logic, I am nothing. Then you're going to shatter into a million pieces, Emily said, moving to Thelian's other side. Look, I'm a scientist. My whole life is about understanding, calculating, making sense of things. But this place? This place doesn't want to make sense. So I stopped trying. That is irrational. Exactly. Emily grinned. Welcome to being human. Thelian's structure flickered and slowly the cracks stopped spreading. The being slumped against the wall, its light dimming. I do not understand how you function like this. Neither do we most of the time, James admitted. Daniel's voice cut through their conversation. Captain, we've got company. Ahead of them, visible through the warped space, were ships. Or what was left of ships. The logical certainty, the Methodian vessel that had entered the dying zone 4 years ago. Its hull was twisted into impossible shapes, frozen in the moment of its destruction. Nearby floated the Quorum expedition's containment spheres, cracked and empty. Further out, they could see the Valkyrie battlecruiser, its massive form torn apart as if by invisible hands. 17 expeditions, Emily whispered. All of them here. All of them dead. James walked closer to the viewport. Each wreck told the same story. They had tried to fight the chaos with order. The Methodians had used logic and calculation. The Quorum had attempted to impose telepathic harmony on the Discord. The Valkyrie had used their warrior discipline and ancient tactics. Every one of them had tried to bring structure to a place that had no structure. They couldn't adapt, Daniel said quietly. They kept doing what worked for them everywhere else. But this isn't everywhere else. A thought struck James. How long have we been in here? Emily checked her instruments, laughed, then checked again. According to the ship's clock, 3 hours. According to my watch, 12 minutes. According to my biological rhythms, maybe 2 days. Take your pick. And we're still flying, James said. Still alive. Still mostly sane. Are we though? Emily asked with a grin. Still sane? Thelian, still slumped against the wall, spoke in a quieter voice than before. I do not understand. Why are you not experiencing psychological collapse? Every species before you went mad within hours of entering this region. Yet you joke. You smile. You act as if reality breaking is merely an inconvenience. Daniel turned from the helm, his scarred hands steady on controls that shouldn't work. We've been living with chaos our whole lives, observer. Our stock markets collapse. Our weather kills thousands. Our politicians make no sense. Our relationships defy logic. We build our societies on fault lines and near volcanoes. We've been training for this place since we were cave dwellers, watching the sky and wondering why sometimes the rain came and sometimes it didn't. James nodded slowly. The other species conquered chaos on their home worlds. They built perfect civilizations based on logic or harmony or strength. But we never did. We just learned to dance with it. This is just another Tuesday for us, Emily added. Thelian's light pulsed weakly, processing this impossible concept. Ahead, the dying zone stretched on, getting worse with every passing moment, hour, second that may or may not have been passing at all. They found the artifact 3 days later. Or maybe it was 3 minutes. Time had stopped meaning anything useful hours ago. Emily's watch showed times from the past, present, and future all at once. She had given up looking at it. The artifact sat at the center of the dying zone, floating in a bubble of space that looked almost normal. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. A sphere of silver metal covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change, ancient beyond measure. This was what the Council wanted. This was what 17 expeditions had died trying to retrieve. There it is, James said, feeling a surge of hope. We actually made it. Don't celebrate yet, Daniel warned. His hands gripped the controls tighter. Something's wrong. Look at the space around it. Emily pulled up her sensors and immediately wished she hadn't. The readings made her head spin. There's something there. Something big. Something that's erasing the data as fast as I can collect it. Thelian, still recovering in the corner, suddenly stood up straighter. Its crystalline form pulsed with urgent light. No. This was not in the reports. The previous expeditions never mentioned a guardian. Maybe they didn't live long enough to report it, Daniel muttered. As if responding to their words, the space around the artifact rippled. Reality tore open like paper and something emerged. It wasn't a creature, wasn't a being, wasn't anything that should exist. It was the absence of existence itself. A hole in the universe shaped vaguely like movement. Emily's instruments went haywire, then simply stopped working. It's unmaking things. Everything it touches just stops being. Not destroyed, not killed. Just erased. Like it never existed. The entity moved toward them, and where it passed, stars blinked out of existence. A piece of debris from an old ship vanished mid-flight. Even the twisted physics of the dying zone seemed to recoil from it. Evasive maneuvers. James shouted. Daniel threw the ship sideways. The entity passed through the space where they had been, and Emily watched in horror as part of their sensor array simply ceased to exist. Not broken. Not damaged. Just gone as if it had never been installed. We need a plan, James said, gripping his chair as the ship shook. Ideas. Retreat, Thelian said immediately. This is beyond our capabilities. The artifact is not worth our lives. We can't go back empty-handed, Emily argued. Earth gets quarantined forever. Better quarantined than erased from existence. Daniel spun the ship again, barely avoiding another pass from the entity. It's getting faster. Learning our patterns. We can't keep dodging forever. James thought frantically. 17 expeditions had failed. They must have tried everything. Military tactics. Scientific solutions. Telepathic communication. Nothing had worked. The entity had erased them all. What could humans do that nobody else had tried? Emily suddenly laughed, a slightly manic sound. This is insane, but what if we stop trying to fight it? Explain, James said, watching the entity circle around for another attack. Every species that came here tried to impose their logic on this place. Order. Structure. Plans. But this thing, this unmaker, it exists in pure chaos. What if we speak its language? You want to communicate with entropy? Thelian's voice cracked with disbelief. Why not? Emily pulled up a communication panel, her fingers flying. Daniel, when you're in an impossible situation, what do you do? I trust my gut, Daniel said. I go with what feels right even if it makes no sense. Exactly. Emily started broadcasting on all frequencies. Not data. Not mathematics. Just noise. Random patterns. Chaos. The entity paused as if listening. It's working, James whispered. Keep going. Emily grinned and turned to Daniel. Tell it a joke. What? You heard me. Tell the embodiment of entropy a joke. Daniel, his face showing complete bewilderment, leaned toward the communication system. Okay, why did the quantum physicist refuse to jump? Because he was already in a superposition of being too scared and too excited. Silence. The entity drifted closer but didn't attack. That was terrible, Emily said. Your turn then, genius. Emily thought for a moment, then spoke toward the entity. A photon checks into a hotel. The bellhop asks if it has any luggage. The photon says no, I'm traveling light. She paused. Get it? Because photons are light and that doesn't make sense but also totally makes sense. The entity rippled, its form shifting in ways that might have been curiosity. James, feeling ridiculous but desperate, pulled out a deck of cards from his pocket. He had brought them as a stress relief, never thinking he would need them like this. He held them up toward the viewport. Want to play poker? 5-card draw? Texas Hold'em? Go fish. Thelian's crystalline form was flashing rapidly, colors shifting in what was definitely panic now. You are attempting to play cards with oblivion itself. This is madness. This is illogical. This is. The entity moved. But not to attack. It drifted sideways, creating a clear path to the artifact. Emily stared in shock. Did it just let us pass? Don't question it, Daniel said, already moving the ship forward. Just go. They flew toward the artifact, the entity watching but not attacking. James could feel its attention on them, like being observed by something that existed beyond normal perception. It was studying them, perhaps confused by creatures who didn't flee or fight, but instead tried to engage with chaos on its own terms. Daniel brought the ship alongside the artifact. Emily suited up and went outside, her magnetic boots clanking on the hull. Through the viewport, James watched her retrieve the ancient sphere, carefully placing it in a containment field. The entity circled them slowly, a predator that had chosen not to strike. Emily climbed back inside, clutching the artifact. Got it? Let's get out of here before it changes its mind. As they turned to leave, James looked back at the entity one last time. He raised his hand in a salute, a gesture of respect between kindred spirits who understood that sometimes chaos was just chaos, and the only way to survive it was to dance along. The entity rippled once more, and James could have sworn it waved back. The Resilience emerged from the dying zone on a Tuesday morning, exactly 14 days after they had entered. Or maybe it was 3 weeks. Or 6 hours. Time still felt slippery to everyone on board, like trying to hold water in their hands. The Council's monitoring station picked them up immediately. Within minutes, communication channels flooded with messages. Disbelief. Confusion. 18 expeditions had entered the dying zone over the past century. Only one had ever come back. James sat in the captain's chair, exhausted but grinning. Emily was asleep at her console, her head on her arms. Daniel hummed an old song as he guided them toward the council station. And Thelian stood quietly at the back of the bridge, its crystalline form still showing the fine cracks from its near collapse. The Methodian observer had barely spoken since they left the dying zone. It had spent most of the return journey in what looked like meditation, its lights dim and pulsing slowly. When they docked at the station, an entire delegation was waiting. Methodians, Qorim, Velkari, and a dozen other species James didn't recognize. They all stared at the humans like they were ghosts. Ambassador Rebecca Hayes was there too, her face showing relief and something else. Pride maybe. She stepped forward as James descended the ramp. You did it, she said simply. We did, James confirmed. He held out a data chip. And we brought back more than just the artifact. Emily recorded everything. Quantum readings. Navigation data. Information that could change how everyone understands that region of space. A Velkari elder, its scales showing the pale color of great age, stepped forward. Impossible. The dying zone destroys all recording equipment. No data has ever survived. Emily, now awake and standing beside James, smiled. That's because everyone tried to record perfect data. Clean numbers. Precise measurements. We recorded chaos. Messy, incomplete, contradictory information. Turns out that's exactly what you need to understand a place where nothing makes sense. The delegation moved to a large chamber where the council had gathered. Once again Rebecca stood before the assembled species. But this time she wasn't alone. James, Emily and Daniel stood with her. And at the center of it all, Thelian prepared to give testimony. The Methodian observer's voice, when it spoke, was different from before. Less certain. Less crystalline perfect. I was sent to witness humanity's failure, Thelian began. I expected to document their deaths as I have documented 16 previous expeditions. I expected them to fail as all logical beings must fail when confronted with absolute chaos. The chamber was completely silent. I was wrong, Thelian continued. Humanity did not fail because humanity does not approach problems as we do. When confronted with the impossible, they did not calculate. They did not plan. They did not attempt to impose order on chaos. A quorum representative pulsed with confused colors. Then how did they succeed? They adapted, Thelian said. They embraced the chaos rather than fighting it. When I attempted to process the dying zone through logic, my mind began to fracture. The humans helped me understand something I had never experienced in my existence. Sometimes logic is the wrong tool for the problem. A Valkyrie warrior stood, its massive form radiating skepticism. You are saying they succeeded through disorder? Through randomness? No, Thelian replied. They succeeded through adaptability. Through their capacity to function in uncertainty. The Methodians sent perfect AI systems that could not function when perfection became meaningless. The Quorim sent telepaths who went mad when they sensed minds that existed in quantum superposition. The Valkyrie sent warriors trained in 10,000 battle tactics, none of which applied to a battlefield where cause and effect had no meaning. Thelian's form pulsed brighter. Humanity sent a disgraced captain who trusted his instincts over regulations. A scientist who felt quantum patterns instead of calculating them. A miner who navigated by intuition rather than instruments. They succeeded because they are comfortable with chaos in a way that no other species is. The head Methodian arbiter, the same one who had pronounced humanity's trial, spoke. Are you suggesting that disorder is superior to order? No, Thelian said firmly. I am suggesting that the galaxy needs both. We, the elder species, have built our civilizations on foundations of logic, harmony, and discipline. We have achieved great things. But we have also become rigid. We cannot adapt to true chaos because we have eliminated chaos from our worlds. Humanity has not. They live with uncertainty every day. It makes them unpredictable, yes. Sometimes violent, yes. But it also makes them capable of things we cannot do. Emily stepped forward, holding up the artifact. This device was created by a civilization that predated all of you by millions of years. They put it in the most chaotic region of space, guarded by entropy itself. Maybe they knew that only a species comfortable with chaos could ever retrieve it. Maybe they were waiting for humanity. Or maybe we just got lucky. She grinned. Either way, we brought it back. The council deliberated for 3 hours. James spent the time in a waiting room, drinking coffee that actually stayed in the cup and obeying normal physics. It felt wonderful. When they were called back, the head arbiter spoke. The council grants humanity full membership among the civilized species. You have proven your worth in a way none of us anticipated. Rebecca bowed formally, but James could see her fighting a smile. The arbiter continued. However, we must also acknowledge that humanity's success has revealed a weakness in our own thinking. We have become too ordered, too predictable. Perhaps there is wisdom in controlled chaos. As they left the chamber, Daniel nudged James. Did we just teach the galaxy's oldest civilizations that being a little crazy is okay? I think we did, James laughed. Thelian approached them, its cracked form somehow seeming more complete despite its imperfections. I have requested a transfer, it said. I wish to continue studying humanity, to understand how you function in chaos. If you will have me. Emily grinned and clapped the crystalline being on what might have been a shoulder. Welcome to the madness, observer. First lesson, nothing ever goes according to plan, and that's perfectly fine. That seems inefficient, Thelian observed. It is, James agreed. But it works. As they walked toward the docking bay where the Resilience waited, ready for whatever came next, Rebecca caught up with them. The council is already asking for human consultants, she said. Apparently there are other impossible problems they've been unable to solve. They want our perspective. Our perspective being we have no idea what we're doing but we'll figure it out? Daniel asked. Exactly that. James looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy that had just opened up to humanity. They had proven themselves worthy not by being perfect, but by being perfectly human. Chaotic, adaptable, and absolutely refusing to accept that anything was truly impossible. So, Emily said, "What do we do now?" James smiled. "Whatever comes next. We'll make it up as we go." And somehow that felt exactly right.